In recent years, both in the Institute specifically and generally in the conference, the main pillar of national resilience in Israel and our ability to deal with national and political crises. I think that at the backdrop of the regime overall events over the past 18 months and the continued attempts of the government to implement this overall, even after the horrific events of October 7th, the barriers which the government faces blocking its ability to realize their vision. And those who are still standing vigil to protect Israeli democracy, we can list just a few establishments, the High Court of Justice and the State Advocacy and the Movement for Quality Government, which you had, Advocate Dr. Eliad Shraga, which spearheads all the lawsuits presented to the High Court of Justice, all the petitions presented to the High Court of Justice. And I think we couldn't have timed the interview with you better than just a few hours after the High Court of Justice issued its ruling on the petition that you submitted regarding an equal burden. And this is something that the movement which you had has been leading for 25 years. And along the way, it managed to overturn two draft evasion laws, the Tal law and the Shaked law. And what can we expect now in view of the ruling of the High Court of Justice with respect to how it will influence the government, how it will influence the street? What do you think? Well, first of all, good afternoon. It's definitely a historic ruling of the High Court of Justice. The Supreme Court, for the first time in history, instructs to immediately draft all 63,000 ultra-Orthodox men who are in the category of those whose conscription has been delayed. Not only do they instruct to draft them, since there is no other normative system allowing for anything else, it also instructs to stop all the financial support. It means you need to understand that we're talking about a lot of money, hundreds of millions of shekels that all of a sudden shut down this entire sector. So this is definitely a dramatic, historic ruling, and I truly hope that at this time, now that we're facing this terrible war and the IDF needs so badly more manpower, just so that we understand the scope, it's missing at least 3 maneuvering divisions. These 63,000 ultra-Orthodox men can or are a potential for 6 divisions. So that's what it's missing. This is what the military needs. So they should now also share the burden and help out. That's what we expect of them. 2 politicians sat here. They sit and roll their eyes. One of them made his career over equal burden, and that's Mr. Kish. That's how he started the demonstrations with us 25 years ago. And Yuli Edelstein also sat here, and they all speak so nicely and sweetly, but beneath the surface, what's happening right now, and we need to understand, we're all very happy and excited over the ruling of the High Court of Justice, but these respectable gentlemen are promoting a new draft evasion law. That's the law of continuity. I believe that the street will now start heating up. We'll see the ultra-Orthodox taking the streets, in contrast to what happened in the judiciary overhaul. Here, there are players who will appear very quickly. You'll see them. They're going to start blocking roads. And that allegedly will exert pressure on these legislators, and by the end of the summer session of the Knesset, we will find ourselves with a new draft evasion law. What's truly sickening here, beyond the fact that they're promoting a new draft evasion law, simultaneously they're also promoting laws to make the burden even harder. They just raised the exemption age for for reservists, and now they want to increase the number of years that regular conscripts serve. And it's crazy, on the one hand, promoting a draft evasion law. On the other hand, they're promoting laws that will make the burden of reserve and military duty even greater on those who do serve. And now's the money time, and hopefully we'll manage to stop this draft evasion law. Thank you. Another question, which is also very relevant and topical, is the warning letters sent only yesterday to the Prime Minister, to the former director of Mossad, and some other senior officials. These were issued by the Commission of Inquiry on the submarines, and they stated that their involvement even harmed state security, national security, and you were one of the people who exerted pressure for the establishment of this commission, and you petitioned to the High Court of Justice, which ultimately led to the appointment of this commission. What is the meaning of these letters of warning? What can we see with those who have been warned in these letters, and what do you think is missing from the warning letters sent to these people? So let's start with the good news. We have 2 days of good news. Even though the justice system grinds very slowly, but ultimately it does grind, it does operate, and we can be very happy that finally we can see the justice at the end of the tunnel. And yesterday's decision is indeed an extremely dramatic one. It's an event that I believe is the most terrible event in Israel's history. I don't think that there's been such another situation of such a deeply rooted corruption, truly so horrific, that entered the inner sanctum of the state of Israel. It pertains to Israel's strategic weapons, and anybody who understands a thing or two about this topic knows exactly what we're talking about. So this time things have been exposed, and it's important to remember that this has been going on for almost 7 years since that TV news item when we took it upon ourselves to do investigative research. I spent 3 years to do this research in order to fully understand what happened. And it's a multi-tentacled event with 2 engines, and I'll soon tell you exactly what it included, but there are 2 engines which are actually the motivation for this whole thing, and we're talking about money, and a lot of money behind this story. First of all, there's the stock story that Netanyahu got out of it with 25 million shekels in his pocket, and understanding the commissions there, they changed the commissions from 2% to 3.75, because if we multiply, just so that you understand what we're talking about, if you multiply this by hundreds of millions of dollars, then these are huge sums of money, billions of shekels that were allocated for these vessels, and the IDF didn't actually need. So one could say, yes, it's wonderful that we have 6 or 9 or 12 or 17 submarines, but at the end of the day, this is a military economy. And I think that the person who said the most accurate sentence in the discussion on the procurement of the 6th submarine was Gabi Ashkenazi. And in 2010, he said, as if he could foresee the future, he said, if you buy the 6th submarine, we won't have money for tanks and APCs for the military to maneuver in Sajaiya, in Gaza. And this is also what's happening today. They invested a lot of money in the Navy and not a lot of money in the ground forces, and we see the tremendous shortages in the ground forces. But I think that the worst thing here, everybody's rolling their eyes and saying, oh, wow, really, suitcases with money to Hamas? Who approved this? We didn't know, we didn't understand, we didn't see. But when I started my investigation, my research, what truly shocked me was that the Prime Minister reaches a decision behind the back of the commander of the Navy, behind the back of the Chief of General Staff, behind the back of the Minister of Defense, behind the back of the President, and allows the Germans to sell submarines to the Egyptian Navy. That's the worst damage ever caused to Israel's national security, and it's important we understand that the Egyptian Navy is the sixth largest navy in the world. It's a very strong one, and if, God forbid, tomorrow or next week what happened back in 2011 will happen again, and the Muslim brothers will rise to power again in Egypt, and God forbid if we need to fight against the Egyptian Navy, I think that would be that would have terrible consequences. Now there are 4 advanced German submarines that can be in Alexandria in the port and harm our systems in the port in Haifa, not to mention the fact that they can be 300 meters from the coast for 3 months. Nobody knows that they're there and what's on them, and one day they could surprise us. So this is something truly terrible, and if you ask me what's missing in the warning letters issued, they did mention the submarines and the permission to the Egyptians to buy the submarines, but what I think is most horrible is that the motivation wasn't investigated, that the financial issue wasn't looked into. When we stood at the High Court of Justice and Attorney General Mendelblit, and it's his fault that this case 3000, wasn't properly investigated in real time, and he told the High Court of Justice that the money that was received, the money that Netanyahu received from his cousin Milkovsky, and he said this was a perk. This was a significant perk given, and then he instructed not to look into it. So this will be researched, but the motivation will not be researched, and unfortunately this is a strategic failure. But like I said, there is some light. At least we do have these warning letters, and all those who claim that we were blowing things out of proportion and nothing really happened, and all these claims that it was very easy to constantly repeat them, but now they've all been silenced. Thank you. Well, the movement
which you lead, only throughout the last year submitted several petitions to the High Court in several of the biggest issues of the day, stopping the judicial reform, the question on the High Court in terms of the commissioner post that Ben Gvir wanted to take, shareholding in the enlistment, in which we heard the court ruling today, more and more. Okay, many major issues. How have we reached this point of continuous collapse? And does the High Court have a role in this? Certainly. I think that if there is one thing that also has to be addressed, and if there is a state commission of inquiry, and for all of those who are unaware, we submitted a petition, a demand to establish a state commission of inquiry. Netanyahu can't avoid it. He won't be able to begin a commission through the president, and he won't be able to go around the High Court. And I hope that the court, in regards to after the response of the state attorney, that in order to save the IDF's soldiers and officers from the ICC and ICJ in Hague, if we want to reduce the risk, we must establish a commission of inquiry, and I hope that the court demands so. But you are saying that he is trying to disrupt its establishment, stop this inquiry commission to be established. Yes, they're disrupting it, but I think the court has to also have a reckoning moment. And if there's one issue that apparently brought us to the point that is that horrific ruling that was given in May 2020, and that same High Court ruling that we lost 11-0 to the establishment of this administration and the coalition agreement. I think this time 11 High Court judges have given a man with 3 indictment letters to continue to be allowed to be a prime minister is a disgrace, is an unforgivable sin. Thanks to that horrific ruling, we have reached the point where we are. I stood in the High Court and I said to the judges at the time, Rome will burn in flames, and Netanyahu will be like Nero playing a violin against the flames and watching it burn. Because this is such a disgrace. It's a scandal. And in 1993, when we stood at the court, Judge Shamgar said that a man like Deri with 3 indictments of corruption cannot be a minister in the state of Israel. And it cannot be that in 2020, 11 high court judges preside over court, and look at a man with such terrible indictments and such terrible history to continue to be prime minister of the state of Israel. It is unreasonable. It is a disgrace, and the high court has to take this into their agenda and think about it. Last summary line, if I may, because we're out of time. All right, this is the money time, ladies and gentlemen. We all have to enlist in order to save our beloved country. We cannot allow this bunch of criminals. Look who's sitting in the cabinet. Tzachi Hanegbi, a criminal, sitting in, presiding in cabinet of, who is Deri, an indicted criminal. After we managed to throwing him out, thanks to 11 judges, he was allowed back in. And a prime minister with 3 indictments, and Dremer in that same government that didn't even serve in the IDF. These are the people running the state of Israel. It's unbelievable. This is the moment of our worst decline, and we must all now enlist and shoulder the burden and fight for our country. And if we recover, if we rehabilitate then we will be successful. Thank you.